All right. So we have actually finished the main part of our Sefer, or that main section of the Sefer, which was called the Nitzos of Mashiach. And basically what we need to do and what that looks like and why the Rebbe told us that we need to take responsibility and do our part in bringing Mashiach. The final section of our Sefer is called the Torah Shel Mashiach. So the idea here is really to actually understand what the Torah, what is this, what revelations in Torah have we had, and how do we see that as a preparation for Geulah? And we're going to see in general the different sections of Torah and how they were revealed to us at different times, and also particularly in the Torah of the Rebbe and how the Rebbe connected a lot of everything in terms of whether it was the Parsha or whether it was the Yom Tov or whether it was the Rambam, always connected to Mashiach. So this is again the Chelik Revi of our Sefer, and it's this chapter of Mem Dalet. His Geulah. Okay, and so let's just I'll start and then I'll hand over. Liba, I'll hand over to you. Chalkei Torah is my name. So what we know is Torah Seinu Hakdoisha. I'll call Chalkei Torah Achasi. Of course, the Torah with all of its different parts is really one Torah. So whether Hashem gave it to us immediately as a Torah Shebechsav or Torah Shebal Peh, at the end of the day, it's one Torah. Because Torah in general is the Chachma, the Ratzon of Hashem, and Hashem and His Chachma is one. So the Torah, no matter what parts of the Torah we're talking about, it's all really one. He bought ba'afan mishanim akshurim zmanim u'mukam mishanim. Heichal mi'ma'amar hasinai ba'tkufa ba'yosh v'Yisrael be'eretz hakodesh v'nimshach al pnei kol hadaros v'chol mukam sheba'olam ad d'rein zeh. So we know though that while the Torah is one Torah, the Torah was revealed in this world in different ways, connected to the times and the places and different places. Obviously, beginning with Har Sinai. So Maimon Har Sinai, when we heard Hashem's voice and we heard the Aseres Dibros, and then up through the time that we settled in Eretz Yisrael, and through all the generations and through all the different places that the Bnei Yisrael were, we had more and more revelations of this Torah. But in general, we could say there were three different sort of sections or parts of Torah. The first was Torah Shebechsav, Hakalelas Chavdal Sifrei Tanach, Sheniskal B'Dvar Hashem U'Moshe U'Lechol Neviim She'acharav. So of course, the first section we all are aware of course, is Torah Shebechsav, the written Torah. We talk about Torah Shebechsav, we're talking about Chavdal Sifrei Tanach, and of course that was revealed to Moshe, Dvar Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu himself, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and then to all the Neviim afterwards. And the Tanakh, when we talk about Tanakh, the Chavdal Sifrei Tanakh, we're talking about from Har Sinai until the end of Tanakh, which was at the beginning of Bayis Sheni. So when Ezra Nehemiah came back to Eretz Yisrael, that was really the last sefer of the Sifrei Tanakh. B'meshach tkufa zu, hayu b'nei Yisrael b'ikar b'Eretz Yisrael or b'derech eleh. Now, when we talk about Torah Shebechsav, that was the time b'nei Yisrael were generally in Eretz Yisrael or on their way there. When we into Galus Babel, of course, there was a very small part of Tanakh that was Galus Babel, like Gil's Esther, for example, and Daniel. Of course, until they came back to Eretz Yisrael, and that's when Tanakh was sealed by Anshe Knesset Geulah and our final Svarim of Ezra and Nehemiah. So that's Torah Shebechsav. Again, majority of Torah Shebechsav was at the time the Bnei Yisrael were in Eretz Yisrael or on our way to Eretz Yisrael, except for those few that were in Galus Babel. Then we have Torah Shebal Peh, Akalelis Beikar Shisha Sidrei Mishnah Gemara. So Torah Shebal Peh, although given to Moshe Rabbeinu at the same time at Har Sinai, the written form that we have of Torah Shebal Peh, including, of course, the Mishnah and the Gemara, incorporating, of course, things that were given halach l'Moshe Sinai, told directly to Moshe, and included in Mishnah is also halachas that were learned based on the laws of, we call them laws of exegesis, right? The laws of how you study Torah, the laws that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us, like the ideas of Klal Prat, Prat Klal, Klal Chomers, that we say in Rabbi Shmuel's, you give him Midrash Torah and Drushes Behem in the davening in the morning. But takanas shetiknu gzeres shegazu b'koyach shenitlahem b'Torah. Also takanas and gzeres that were given, that the Chachamim made with the koyach given in the Torah, that Chacham can make these kind of takanas and gzeres based on the times. V'amin matzinu kam takanas kanu kvar b'daris harishayim aydei Moshe Rabbeinu atzmai v'achrav aydei Yeshua v'David v'Shlomo. Now it's true that we find takanas that were made even earlier, right? So takanas weren't only in the later times. We have takanas that were already made in earlier generations by Moshe Rabbeinu himself and Yeshua and David and Shlomo. But mainly, but the main takanas and gzeres that we talk about are the ones that were made later on by the Zugos and the Tanaim in the time that Bnei Yisrael were in Eretz Yisrael during the Bayis Sheni and afterwards. And then, so when we talk about Torah Shabbat Peh, we talk about Mishnah and the Takanas and the Gzeres and all of the things that were in all the generations through all the Al-Maraim in Eretz Yisrael and Babel until, of course, the sealing of Talmud Bavli in Babel. The third part that we have is Minhag Yisrael, Minhag, customs. Shechachma Yisrael Hanhigu, Asher Bnei Yisrael Mitzad Aso Nahagu Kain, B'Nasa Minhag Yisrael Torah. So then we have customs that the Chachamim behaved in this particular way, or Bnei Yisrael behaved in certain ways, and then we say Minhag Yisrael Torah, that the minhagim that we have, we don't take them lightly because we consider them like Torah itself. And here too, we have different kinds of minhagim. We have minhagim very, very early and old minhagim that were from the very earlier generations, from the times of the Tanaim and Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael and Babel. However, the majority of minhagim that we have today come from the generations that were after the Gemara was sealed. And so most of the Mahagim that we have today actually came when Bnei Yisrael were scattered to all the different countries, and the Torah was exiled with them from their place in Babel to all these other places, and that's where a lot of our Mahagim today come from. Okay, so understand that we have these three key sections. We're now going to try to understand what is the difference between all of these parts. ליבה, go ahead.
ובפרטיות יותר, תורה שבכתב נחלקת לג' חלקים כלליים. 5 חומשי תורה שניתנו לנו על ידי משה רבינו עצמו במשך 40 שנה שלאחר מתן תורה עד הכניסה לארץ. So in particular, we see that the Torah שבכתב is also divided into 3 general parts. The first part is the 5 חומשים that were given to us by Moshe Rabbeinu during the 40 years the Bnei Yisrael were after Matan Torah until they came into Eretz Yisrael. ולאחר מכן באים ספרי הנביאים והכתובים המקיפים את התקופה שמאז הכניסה לארץ בימי יהושע ועד החזרה אליה לאחר גלות בבל בימי עזרא ונחמיה. So the second part, no, the two other parts is the Nevi'im, the second part is Ksuvim is the third part. And they are from the time that Yeshua brought the Yid into Eretz Yisrael till this was the Nevi'im, and it's finishing with the Ksuvim in the times of the Golas Bavel, that when Ezra and Nehemiah came back with the Yidden from Bavel. בתורה שבעל פה נחלקת גם כן לכמה חלקים. החל מהמשנה, בה נאספה תורת התנאים שהיו בארץ ישראל בזמן הבית השני, ובדורות הסמוכים לתקופת הבית. So also the Torah Shabbat is also divided to a few parts. The first part, it starts from the first part in the Mishnah, where was all the Torah of the Tanoim that lived in Eretz Yisrael in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, and in the close generations to the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. ואחרי זה באה ברייתא, שעניינה לבאר דברי המשנה, והיא, יש לה שייכות יותר לדורות שלאחר החורבן. ולחכמי בבל. Okay, so the second part, the second is the Braita, that they are explaining the Mishnah, and it has more connection to the generations after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash and to the Chachomim that lived in Bavel. ולאחר מכן באה תקופת הגמרא, הנחלקת לתלמוד ירושלמי, שנתחבר על ידי רבי יוחנן בארץ ישראל, אחר חורבן הבית בקרוב מ-300 שנה, ותלמוד בבלי שנתחבר על ידי רב אשי בארץ שנער, אחר שחיבר רבי יוחנן התלמוד הירושלמי בכמו 100 שנה. So they have the time of the Gemara, which is also divided to two, the Talmud Yerushalmi that was written by Rabbi Yochanan in Eretz Yisrael after the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, close to 300 years. So it means it was written during 300 years.
Yeah, it was finished. It was the Chasima was about 300 years after the Korban.
Okay. And then we have the Talmud Bavli that he was written by Rav Ashi in Golus already, in exile in Eretz Shinar, and he wrote it like around 100 years after the Talmud Yerushalmi. ומשם ואילך נתפזרו ישראל בכל הארצות, פיזור יתר, והגיעו לקצוות ולאיים הרחוקים. והחכמים שעמדו אחר חיבור התלמוד, כבר לא היו רק בארץ ישראל ובארץ שנער, אלא גם בספרד ובצרפת. So from there, from the times of the Gemara, so the Yidden was scattered all over the countries, and they came even to further places, to further islands, more than the Chachamim that were in the times of the Talmud. They were not only in Eretz Yisrael and Eretz Shina, but also they came to Spain and to France. שארצות אלו, ספרד וצרפת, היו מרכז לתורה במשך תקופת רבותינו הראשונים. So those countries, Spain and France, were the center of the Torah in the times of the first of the Rishonim. לאחר מכן המשיכה התורה ללכת בגולה אחר גולה, עד לדורות האחרונים שבהם נתפזרו ישראל בכל הארצות ממש, גם במקומות הנידחים שבקצה השמיים, שלפני כן לא דרכה שם רגל ישראל, כולל גם לחצי כדור התחתון ביבשת אמריקה וכולי, שבו לא היה מתן תורה עד לאותו הזמן, ובכל מקום לומדים תורה ומגלים בה עניינים חדשים. So it continues to... So after that, the Torah continued to go to exile after exile till the last generations that altogether were mamash scared all over the countries, also to faraway places that in the end of the sky that beforehand people didn't step there. It's including also the lower half of the globus, which means America, that there wasn't any Matan Torah till that time, and now in every place we learn Torah and we discover new inyonim in the Torah. אך למרות כל החילוקים הנ"ל, כל חלקי התורה כולם ניתנו מהשם אחד על ידי רואה אחד, כמאמר חז"ל, כל מה שתלמיד ותיק עתיד לחדש נאמר למשה מסיני. כלומר, שזה נמצא בהלם וברמז במה שמשה קיבל מסיני. So, although we have all these divisions, but actually all the parts of the Torah, we all accepted from one Hashem, through the one shepherd. Like our Chazal say that whoever a good student or a smart student or whatever has to, all these chidushim already, they were given to Moshe Rabbeinu in Har Sinai. Means that already it's there in a hidden way and in a remez that Moshe Rabbeinu already got in the Sinai. כך שלאמיתו של דבר, אין זה חידוש ממש, אלא רק גילוי ההלם. So actually it's not a really חידוש, whenever somebody says a new thing, it's not really new, because it's only discovering what was hidden. שזה כולל גם המנהגים וכיוצא בזה, שנתחדשו עד סוף כל הדורות, שכולם אינם אלא גילוי של רצון השם וחוכמתו. So all the minhag, it includes all the minhagim, all the things that were kind of discovered with the Chadash till the end of all the generations. All those things that seems to be new, actually they are not new, but they're only the discover of Hashem's will and his chokmah. אלא שאת הכל עשה יפה בעיתו, ולכל עניין יש את הזמן והמקום המתאים להתגלות, כפי שעלה במחשבה לפניו. So Hashem did everything in the right time, and that's why every Inyan has his time and his place where he has to be discovered like Hashem wanted it. ועל דרך זה, לכל עניין, יש את אופן התגלותו, אם בצורה ישירה כהתגלות דבר השם לנביאים, או בצורה עקיפה על ידי חכמים המתייגעים בשכלם, או בהנהגתם של ישראל מצד עצמם, הכל כפי שעלה במחשבה לפניו. So every Inyan has the way how it has to be discovered. Some things that can be discovered like a straight discovery from through the Nevi'im, that Hashem said openly to the Nevi'im, or it can be in a צורה עקיפה,
like in a roundabout way.
In a roundabout way through the Chachomim that are working hard to understand this Inyan with the Seichel, or it can be in a different way that it's through the Hanhoga of Am Yisrael from themselves, and everything it comes the way Hashem wanted it. How Hashem wanted, that's how it comes to be discovered. אמנם זה גופה, הטעם להתחלקות באופני הגילוי וזמני ומקומות הגילוי, אפשר להבין בשני אופנים. This idea of that things has to be opened in a different time, in a different place, we can understand it in two ways. Why everything has his time and his way how it's being discovered to us. כי בכמה מקומות מבואר בפשטות שמדור לדור הדורות הולכים ויורדים והגלות הולכת ומתגברת. ולכן בכל דור התורה עצמה כמו יורדת מדרגה לדרגה, בהתאם, no, it's not that. It's the next one. No. It's this, we read it already, this part. בהתאם למצב הנמוך של הדור. אך בפנימיות מבואר שאדרבה, מדור לדור הולכים ומתקרבים לביאת משיח צדקנו, ונעשים מוכנים יותר ויותר לביאתו. וכך גם בתורה. Okay.
Then let's go back and see.
Never mind, yeah, let's go back. Okay, so the first explanation is like this. That every generation, the generation is going down, it becomes weaker and less holy, let's say, and the exile is going and getting stronger. And like we said, in every generation, the Torah itself goes from one step to the lower step, according to
Torah goes down, yeah, according to
the situation of the low situation of the generation. So it seems like to be negative things, but actually in the premise we explain that it's not negative, but just the opposite. Every generation that we're going down and down, actually we are getting closer to Mashiach, and we're getting even more prepared to his coming. וכך גם בתורה, הולכים ומתקרבים לגילוי של תורה חדשה אמיתית תצא, גילוי פנימיות התורה על ידי משיח צדקנו. And the same with the Torah, every generation we are coming closer and closer to discovery of the new Torah that Hashem will discover to us, and this is the gilui of the discovery of פנימיות התורה through Mashiach. שלכן חלקי התורה המתגלים בדורות מאוחרים יותר, יש בהם יותר ויותר שייכות לגילוי פנימיות התורה על ידי משיח צדקנו ולעניין של משיח בכלל. So also the part of the Torah that being discovered later the generations, they have more and more connection to the discovery of the Pnimis Torah through Mashiach and general to the Inyan of Mashiach. כפי שתדבר כל זה לכמל בפרטיות בעזרת השם. Like we'll explain that later.
So, you read Sadaris for Albu B'Torah. I'll read something, I'll pass back to you. You read Sadaris for...
Also, no? Sometimes Rivki likes to read. Maybe Rivki wants to read.
Can you read, Rivki?
Yeah, I could read. 1 second, though. I'm just gonna, so that I don't have too much background noise. 1 second. Можно смотреть на мой шум, чтобы... Okay. Yerida Sederis Ba'ilam Uvatira. Yedua, Seder Hadaris, who Seder Shal Paiches Vahelech. Achol Mime Har Sinai, Ubayas Rishan, Az Ha Yisrael Betachas Hamaila. Ulamati Miza Bayis Sheni Shaleshar Sabay Shchina. Ulamati Miza Bizman Hachorban Vagalas, Umizman Lizman Agalas Oida Lachas Miskaberes, Vadaris Halcham Upaichsim. So as we know that the order of the generations is that it keeps getting lower and lower. So starting from the days of Har Sinai and the first Beis Hamikdash, when the Yidden were on the highest level, and then during the second Beis Hamikdash they were on a lower level because the Shekhinah was not really resting in the Beis Hamikdash fully. And lower than this is in the time of Galus, when we don't even have the Beis Hamikdash. And even within Galus, from time to time, the Galus gets stronger and the generations are get lower and lower. And like we said, this itself is the reason why from generation to generation, more parts of Torah were revealed to match the new needs of this low generation. Ubepratias could benagel lidivrei hanavim shenisfasu al Torah shebechsav mavar ad marzakin shebimei Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom kaim Yisrael hatayra chulu aval bimei hanavim shel achrav lo Yisrael eiser matani shel makim v'hu tzirchu hanavim leichicham mitzad sheniskava mehem b'haisa hatayra b'fnei atzma va'adim b'fnei atzmai. So specifically, in connection to the words of the Nevi'im, which were gathered in the written Torah, the Alter Rebbe explains that in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Yidden fulfilled the Torah, but in the days of the Nevi'im that came afterwards, the Yidden did not fulfill the will of Hashem, and therefore they needed the rebuke of these Nevi'im. Okay, because what is niskava? Like they separated themselves?
Some were higher.
What do you say?
Because it was like there was higher than them. There was the Torah, and then there was a person, and they were they weren't on
the same page as the Torah, so to speak. So all the rebuke that we have in the Nevi'im is because, is clearly because of the Yerida Sederis. So in the days of Moshe, we didn't have that part of Torah because we didn't need it at that point. It's interesting because in the Torah, it keeps talking about how the Yidden were complaining and all the sins, but that is, I guess, nothing compared to what came next. Yesh Leimer, Gam Kain Habir B'ma Shemetzino Shanavim Vaksuvim Nechshavim K'may Bir L'masha B'Torah Nimtza Behelim Uveremes Shemepnei Yerida Sederis Tzircha Lefer Shelavar Mizeh Shekvar Nemer B'Torah Atzma. So with these Teichachos, we see whatever's written in these later parts of Torah, they're really explaining what's already hidden in the Torah. But because of the generations going lower, there was a need to explain it better, that which already is written in the Torah. So this is also the explanation of why there are so many decrees from the Rabbanim and new takanas, new things established in the time of Bayis Sheni and also the generations afterwards. So the Alter Rebbe explains that it's because the generations are we're getting lower and lower, and there's a need for more decrees and ways to distance ourselves from sinning. So this is the same thing that the Rambam explains. Why did we need the Mishnah to be written down by Rabbeinu HaKadosh? Because after the Churban, he saw that the students were they were getting less, and there was more and more problems and tsaras by the Yidden. So there was a need to gather everything together quickly so that they should be able to learn it and not forget. וכנזכר לעיל זהו גם הטעם שבעשת תקופה נשרה בו הברייסס, פני שנסמטו על תלמידים ונזכשו בהבנת המשנה כשל עצמה. And this is also the reason why we needed the braises, because there were less students and it started to be hard for them to understand the Mishnah itself. So they needed like more explanation. ולכן הוצרכו לברייסס המבארס דברי המשנה. So that's why we need all these explanations to the Mishnah. ומובן שעל דרך זה הטעם שהוצרכו אחר כך לגמרא מבארס ומפרטס עוד יסר דברי המשנה. And this is the reason why we need the Gemara to explain the Mishnah better, because even, you know, like we couldn't even understand that, because as the generations are getting lower, we need like things to be spelled out more. ועל דרך זה הוא גם החילוק בין התלמודים עצמם, שתלמוד בבלי מאוחר יסר דרכי לפרט יסר מאשר תלמוד ירושלמי ומוקדם יסר. And even within Gemara, we see that the Talmud Bavli is written for a lower generation than the Talmud Yerushalmi. Everything needs to be spelled out even more in detail. וכך גם בנגיע לתקופה של אחר חסימת המשנה בגמרא, שאז נספזרו בני ישראל בכל הארץ, פיזור יסר ורבס קטטה בעולם ונסמאי תלמוד תורה. So, and of course this continues after the Mishnah and the Gemara were already sealed, when the Yidden were spread out throughout all the lands to many, many dots around the world, and there was less Torah learning. takif b'minhagi Yisrael shehunugu achar zman hashas sheminhagim rabim kshurim im yiridas hadaras b'zmanenu zelu mazman hashas. So the minhagim that came up in the time of Geulah, after the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, are connected to the Yeridas Hadaras, to the fact that the generations are lower and we needed more minhagim to like kind of
we lose Rivki. I think Rivki fell out. She'll come back. We needed more minhagim to keep us going in Geulah. Says that here's an example of this. So the idea of saying Maida'ani actually started as a minhag as soon as we wake up. So really, if you look at according to Allah in the Gemara, as soon as you wake up in the morning, you're supposed to say Elokai Neshama. Even though it does have Hashem's name in it. That's because in the earlier generations, it's like their guf was also tahar, like clear, like quite clean in that way, pure, and they were able to mention Hashem's name immediately when they woke up. But what happened in later generations, so Elokai Neshama, the Gemara says you should say immediately when you wake up, was pushed off till after washing the hands, after the Tzilas Yadayim. And instead of Elokai Neshama, it became the custom to say Maida'ani immediately after you wake up. Because there's no Shem Hashem in Maida'ani, and you can say it even before you wash Nagel Aser. So we see another example of how, as the generations got less and less, our minhagim kind of reflect the level of the generation. This and even more. So it's not just that the generations, like we say, Yeridas Hadaras, generations are getting lower and lower, and the Torah, so to speak, has to lower itself to go along with them. Even more, but you could say that the Torah itself is like getting less and less. In other words, the revelation of godliness in the Torah becomes less with every generation. Because even though we said the different parts of Torah in one way are just different ways of Hashem's chachma being revealed, but you can see very clearly, even within the Torah, that even though we say it's all Torah with one Torah and it's one chachma from Hashem, but you can see that you can't compare the revelation of godliness that came in Torah Shebechsav that was directly to Moshe Rabbeinu to the manner of revelation that came in Torah Shebal in a more hidden manner, and how it was enclosed in the seichel of the Chachamim, and then later on with Minhagim. So at every level, the revelation that it's coming from Hashem gets less and less. But Pashtus, on a simple level, so here we see that even though for all parts of Torah it says, be very careful with a light mitzvah like a strong one. In other words, we don't really know mitzvahs that we think are not so harsh versus other ones. So we know, nevertheless, we see, even though we said we have to be very careful, we know that there is, even in halacha, you cannot compare the severity of halacha of Drabanan to the halachas of Daraisa. So we know that when you have a difference between a Darabanan and Daraisa, right? If you are not sure if you did a mitzvah Daraisa, it's the Chumrah. You take the harsher view. And if it's the sfekos of Darabanan, it's the Kula. So for example, to benching is Daraisa. So if you're not sure, if you don't remember, can't remember if you benched or not because you weren't paying attention, Sveika Daraisa, the Chumrah, you have to bench again. Because if you have a suffix and a Daraisa, you take the harsher view. But if you have a suffix Darabanan, for example, make no bracha before you eat, which is Darabanan, then it's the Kula. If you don't remember if you made a bracha or not, you don't, before you ate, you don't make a bracha again because it's the Kula. So there is a difference between Daraisa and Darabanan. Of a mikra shell, he's not just saying din tar din Darabanan, but there are klal, din tar yetra. And the same thing, we know that if there is a conflict, right, between a halacha and Torah or Drabanan, in general, din Torah will push off the din Drabanan. In other words, it takes priority. And the same thing, you can't compare the severity of a minhag versus the halachas from the Rabbanim. And of course, if there's a conflict between a din and a minhag, the din is going to push off the minhag. So minhag is not more important than halacha, even as the drabanan. And drabanan is takes a lesser. So daraisa has priority over drabanan, and drabanan has priority over a minhag. So we see that there is levels within that. And so too, we find in Torah Shebechsav. Chamisha Chumshei Torah nichtavu al-yedei Moshe Rabbeinu atzmai. Chamisha Chumshei Torah, we know the Chumashim were written by Moshe himself. Alav ne'emar peh peh adaber by Mara v'loy b'chidais. That Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu mouth to mouth with a very clear aspaklaya me'ira, a very clear vision, not with any riddles or in a hidden way. And it's impossible to compare Nevuos Moshe Rabbeinu and the Chumash to how the prophecies of the other prophets of the other Nevi'im that came through Mashalim and through riddles, etc. Al derech ze ein hashpes ben Sifrei HaNevi'im shenichtavu b'nevuah mamish the Sifrei HaKsuvim shenichtavu b'ruach HaKodesh. So we talk in the Mucha there. The same thing we talk about Tanakh. So Torah is the Chumash, that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Nevi'im is a lower level, and the Ksuvim weren't even written with Nevuah. It's written with Ruach HaKodesh, which is a lower level. The same thing happens with Torah Shebal Peh. And Nechlas b'Klalos Mishnah, Brisa, and Gemara. Like we saw before, you can divide it into three parts: the Mishnah, Brisa, and Gemara. Hina Mishnah shenichtava be'Eretz Yisrael nechshavas l'mechas u'mediyekas yosim asher Brisa shebavel. So what was in the Mishnah itself that was compiled in Eretz Yisrael is considered more reliable and more exact than the Brisas that came out of Bavel. And again, the words of the Tanaim in the Mishnah and the Brisa are again more reliable than the words of the Amoraim that come in the Gemara. That's why you find that Amoraim can never argue against the words of the Tanaim, because that's a previous generation. And the Alter Rebbe explains the inner reason for that. That this, why is it that one generation cannot argue the generation before? Now, again, the Alter Rebbe explains it's because the light of Hashem is more constricted in every single generation as it goes lower and lower, and therefore the next generation cannot argue with the previous one. And again, the Amoraim, their words are divided between Yerushalmi and Bavli. Shal Talmud Yerushalmi Namar Zet Talmud Yerushalmi. Shabbat or Torah Yosef Lumas Talmud Bavli, all of Kara Chazal as a pasuk Machshakim Hashivani. Shnamar al Churban Ba'Angolos. So the same thing. Talmud Bavli is considered to be light. That the light of Torah is revealed in Talmud Yerushalmi, whereas Talmud Bavli, Chazal referred to it Machshak Mashivani, that in darkness I was put. In other words, it's about Churban and Golos because the Talmud Bavli was compiled in Golos in Bavel. Talmud Bavli Atzma, and again with Talmud Bavli itself, Divrei Hadar Rishon Shal Amoraim Rashmo Rabbi Yochanan, the first generation of Amoraim of Talmud Bavli, Sha'id Hayu Bebeis Medrash Shal Rebbe, Yesh Lehem Mishko Rabbi Yosem Asher Divrei Amoraim Shal Achreim. They have, their words have stronger weight than the Amoraim who came after them. Shalachein Heim Lo Yimharu L'Chalek Al Divrei, and that's why the later Amoraim were not quick to argue on the Amoraim of Rashmo and Rabbi Yochanan because they were the earlier ones. There are times when they actually bring their words and their opinions as like evidence that you can't then argue against. And then again, you can say the same thing. You go to the generations after the Gemara was sealed. It's like we said, we were then scattered to all the other lands. And our the generations got again less and less. And that's why every basin that came up after the times of the Talmud, their thing, whatever they decided, could not then be spread out to all Bnei Israel. And that's why when we start spreading out everywhere, that's why we have the difference in terms of Shulchan Aruch between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Because once you have a basin outside of Eretz Yisrael after the time of the Talmud, these individual Batei Din could not decree for all of Bnei Israel, and that's why a minhag in certain places in certain countries was not the minhag in other countries. So that all demonstrates how there was a lessening of the light of Torah, and the strength of the Torah in every single generation got less and less. So there was less power within even a basin as the generations go on. So what we've seen so far is that, in a sense, this is all showing us how there is a Yeridas Hadaris, right, of how we get less and less, that the light of Hashem is less and less with every generation, and how the Torah gets more and more, you could say, explained and elaborated on because the generation needs it, because the generation is getting less and less. In our next class of Hashem, we'll look at it from the other way around, the Aliyah Sadaris ba'admon Torah. So we looked at it from that point of view of Yerida Sadaris, and now everything has to be explained more, and there's less light of Torah. But like we saw before, that's one way of looking at it, but there's a flip side to that, and saying the other side way of looking at all of this is that we're getting closer and closer to Mashiach, and therefore, in a way, there's an Aliyah Sadaris, a way that we're getting actually more and more light is coming out, not less and less. And I think we'll have a look. I think we'll stop here and we'll look at this one, Mitzvah Shem, in our next class, if it's not already in Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Everybody. We should
Amen.
have Shnas Geulah, Hamitis Vashlima.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.